You don't fail because your goals are too big. You fail because you refuse to start small. You tell yourself you'll begin when you feel ready, when you're confident, motivated, or certain. But readiness is a lie we use to stay comfortable. Real change doesn't begin with clarity. It begins with one uncomfortable step forward. And that first step, small, awkward, imperfect, is more powerful than you think. Step 1. Momentum begins with action, not motivation. Momentum does not come from waiting until you feel ready. It doesn't arrive when motivation finally shows up or when the conditions look perfect. Motivation is unreliable, emotional, and temporary. It rises and falls based on mood, comfort, and external validation. If progress depended on motivation, nothing meaningful would ever be built. Momentum begins the moment you act despite hesitation, uncertainty, or discomfort. Action creates movement, and movement creates clarity. When you move first, your mind follows. Most people reverse the order. They wait to feel inspired before they take a step, believing motivation will somehow remove fear or resistance. But motivation rarely eliminates resistance. It usually avoids it. Action, on the other hand, confronts resistance directly. The first action is often clumsy, incomplete, and uncomfortable, but it breaks the psychological barrier of inaction. Once that barrier is broken, something shifts internally. You stop being someone who thinks about change and become someone who participates in it. That shift is where momentum is born. Action forces engagement with reality. It pulls you out of imagination and into experience. When you act, you gather feedback instead of assumptions. You learn what works and what doesn't, not in theory, but through direct contact. This feedback loop builds competence, and competence builds confidence. Motivation tries to promise confidence before effort, but confidence is a byproduct of effort repeated over time. Each small action reinforces the belief that you are capable of continuing, even when it feels uncomfortable or slow. Momentum is not explosive, it is cumulative. It builds quietly through repeated actions that seem insignificant on their own. One small decision leads to another, and over time, those decisions form patterns. Patterns become habits, and habits reshape identity. You don't suddenly become disciplined. You prove discipline through action until it becomes part of how you see yourself. That identity shift is far more powerful than temporary motivation because it sustains progress even on days when enthusiasm disappears. Waiting for motivation keeps you trapped in anticipation, always preparing but never beginning. Action removes you from that loop. It replaces internal debate with external movement. The body moves first, and the mind adjusts afterward. Once momentum starts, it becomes easier to continue than to stop. Resistance weakens, clarity increases, and progress compounds. The initial action may feel small, but it carries disproportionate weight because it establishes direction. When you act, you declare that change is no longer hypothetical. It is already in motion. Step 2. Small decisions compound into life-changing outcomes. Small decisions rarely feel important in the moment. They seem too minor to matter, too ordinary to influence the direction of a life. Because of that, they are often dismissed, delayed, or ignored. People search for dramatic turning points, believing change must arrive through major events or bold leaps. But life is not shaped by isolated moments of intensity. It is shaped by what is repeated quietly and consistently. Small decisions are the building blocks of every outcome, and their power lies in how they accumulate over time. Each decision, no matter how minor it appears, carries a directional weight. Choosing to wake up 10 minutes earlier, to speak honestly instead of avoiding discomfort, to show up when it would be easier not to. These choices seem insignificant on their own, but direction matters more than speed. A small shift in direction, repeated daily, moves a person further than a single burst of effort followed by inconsistency. The compounding effect works silently, often unnoticed, until the distance between who you were and who you've become becomes undeniable. Small decisions shape habits, and habits shape identity. When a choice is repeated, it sends a signal to the brain about who you are. You are not defined by what you intend to do, but by what you consistently choose. Over time, those choices stop feeling like effort and begin to feel like alignment. What once required discipline becomes automatic, and what once felt uncomfortable becomes familiar. This is how change becomes sustainable, not through force, but through repetition that rewires behavior and self-perception. The danger of small decisions is that their consequences are delayed. Skipping one responsibility, avoiding one difficult conversation, or choosing comfort once feels harmless. But repeated avoidance compounds just as powerfully as effort. The same mechanism that builds strength can also build weakness. That is why awareness matters. Small decisions are never neutral. They are either reinforcing progress or reinforcing stagnation, even when the effects are not immediately visible. Life-changing outcomes do not arrive suddenly. They emerge gradually, formed by hundreds of choices that seem too small to matter at the time. The gap between where people end up is rarely explained by talent or luck alone. It is explained by what they chose to do on ordinary days when no one was watching, when the choice felt easy to dismiss, and when the impact felt far too distant to care about. Step 3. Waiting for confidence keeps you stuck. Waiting for confidence is one of the most subtle ways people stay trapped. It feels reasonable, even responsible, to believe you should feel prepared before you act. Confidence is mistaken for readiness, as if certainty is a prerequisite for movement. But confidence does not appear in advance of effort. It is formed through experience, through exposure, and through the willingness to act while unsure. When you wait for confidence, you are really waiting to avoid discomfort, and that delay quietly becomes a habit. Confidence is not a personality trait reserved for a few. It is a response to repeated evidence that you can survive challenge. That evidence only comes from doing the thing you doubt yourself about. Without action, the mind fills the gap with assumptions, fears, and imagined failures. The longer you wait, the more convincing those stories become. Inaction strengthens self-doubt because there is no counterproof. You begin to believe that hesitation means incapability, when in reality, it only means unfamiliarity. People who appear confident are often simply more practiced at acting without certainty. They have learned that discomfort does not signal danger, and that fear does not mean stop. They understand that clarity comes after engagement, not before it. Waiting to feel confident reverses this process. It demands emotional security before effort, but emotional security is built by effort. This contradiction keeps people locked in preparation, endlessly planning and refining while never stepping into real experience. Confidence grows through exposure. Each time you face what you avoid, the nervous system recalibrates. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable, and what felt impossible becomes routine. This process cannot be rushed or imagined. It must be lived. When you delay action, you delay adaptation. The mind remains sensitive, reactive, and untested. Over time, the fear of starting grows larger than the task itself, making the first step feel heavier than it ever needed to be. Waiting for confidence also shifts responsibility away from choice. It turns action into something that depends on feeling rather than decision. This creates a sense of helplessness, as if progress is controlled by mood instead of agency. Acting without confidence reclaims that agency. It reinforces the understanding that you are capable of moving forward even while uncertain. Each imperfect attempt builds a small layer of trust in yourself, not because the outcome was perfect, but because you acted anyway. Confidence follows evidence, and evidence comes from action. Every step taken without certainty weakens the belief that you must feel ready to begin. Over time, this pattern reshapes how you relate to fear, uncertainty, and self-doubt. You stop asking whether you feel confident enough and start asking whether you are willing to move despite not feeling confident yet. Step 4. Discomfort is the entry fee for growth. Discomfort is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a signal that something is changing. Growth, by its nature, requires leaving what is familiar, and the nervous system resists that shift. Comfort keeps things predictable, but predictability also keeps things static. When people avoid discomfort, they are not protecting themselves from harm. They are protecting themselves from transformation. Every meaningful improvement asks for a temporary period of unease, uncertainty, or strain. Most people are taught, subtly or directly, that discomfort should be eliminated as quickly as possible. Pain is treated as failure, fear as weakness, and uncertainty as a warning sign. This conditioning creates a false expectation that progress should feel smooth and reassuring. But progress almost always feels disruptive before it feels rewarding. The body and mind react to new demands by pushing back, interpreting growth as threat. Learning to tolerate that response is not cruelty toward yourself. It is cooperation with the process of change. Discomfort appears at the threshold of every upgrade in life. Strength training stresses muscle before it builds strength. Learning a new skill overwhelms the mind before it organizes itself. Speaking honestly creates tension before it creates clarity. In each case, the discomfort is temporary, but the growth that follows is lasting. Avoiding that discomfort does not preserve stability, it guarantees stagnation. The absence of challenge may feel safe, but it quietly erodes resilience and confidence over time. Growth requires exposure, not avoidance. When you repeatedly choose what is slightly uncomfortable, your capacity expands. What once felt intimidating becomes manageable, and what felt unbearable becomes tolerable. This expansion is gradual and often invisible in the moment, but it compounds. Discomfort loses its power as the nervous system adapts, recalibrating its sense of what is safe. The fear does not vanish. It becomes familiar, and familiarity reduces its control. The problem is not discomfort itself, but the meaning assigned to it. When discomfort is interpreted as danger, it triggers withdrawal. When it is interpreted as a sign of progress, it becomes navigable. Reframing discomfort does not eliminate the sensation, but it changes your response. Instead of retreating, you remain present. Instead of escaping, you endure long enough to grow through it. This endurance builds trust in your ability to handle difficulty, which becomes a foundation for confidence. Discomfort demands payment up front. Growth delivers the return later. This delay is why many people give up too early, mistaking the cost for a warning rather than an investment. The willingness to pay that cost repeatedly is what separates those who change from those who stay the same. Every step into discomfort is a step into expansion, even when the reward is not immediately visible. Step 5. Consistency beats intensity every time. Intensity feels powerful. It creates the illusion of rapid transformation, of effort compressed into dramatic bursts that promise immediate results. Intense moments are emotionally charged, memorable, and often impressive to others. But intensity is difficult to sustain. It depends on mood, energy, and circumstances aligning perfectly. When those conditions change, intensity collapses, leaving long gaps of inactivity behind. Progress built on intensity alone rises quickly and falls just as fast. Consistency operates differently. It is quieter, less exciting, and often unnoticed. It does not rely on emotional highs or extraordinary effort. Instead, it depends on repetition, structure, and commitment to showing up regardless of how you feel. Small actions performed regularly outperform sporadic bursts of extreme effort because they create momentum that does not disappear when motivation fades. Consistency removes decision fatigue by turning effort into routine, making progress less about willpower and more about habit. Long-term growth requires reliability more than enthusiasm. A moderate effort sustained over time builds skill, resilience, and confidence in a way intensity cannot. When you act consistently, you accumulate experience. That experience compounds, strengthening both competence and self-trust. Each repetition reinforces the belief that progress is possible even on ordinary days. This steady reinforcement shapes identity, turning effort into something automatic rather than something that must be forced. Intensity often leads to burnout. It pushes the system beyond what can be maintained, creating cycles of overexertion followed by withdrawal. These cycles feel productive in the moment, but destabilizing in the long run. Consistency respects limits while gradually expanding them. It allows adaptation to occur without overwhelming the body or mind. By pacing effort, consistency creates durability, ensuring that progress does not depend on perfect conditions or peak energy. Consistency also builds resilience. When challenges arise, a consistent framework provides stability. You don't have to decide whether to act. You simply follow the pattern you've already established. This removes emotional negotiation from the process. You act not because you feel inspired, but because it is what you do. Over time, this reliability creates a sense of control and agency that intensity alone cannot provide. The real power of consistency is invisible in the short term. Results appear slowly, almost imperceptibly, until they accumulate into something substantial. This delay often causes people to abandon consistency in favor of intensity, chasing faster rewards. But what grows slowly grows deeply. Consistent effort strengthens foundations, ensuring that progress is stable rather than fragile. While intensity may spark action, consistency sustains it, shaping outcomes that endure far beyond the moment of effort. Step 6. The first step rewires your identity. The first step does more than move you forward. It changes how you see yourself. Before action, identity is built on assumptions, intentions, and stories about what you might do someday. These stories feel real, but they remain untested. The moment you take the first step, those stories are challenged by evidence. Action replaces speculation with experience, and experience begins to reshape identity. You are no longer someone who only thinks about change. You are someone who has acted. Identity is not formed by declarations or goals. It is formed by behavior. The brain constantly updates its self-image based on what you do, not what you plan. When you take the first step, even a small one, the mind records it as proof of capability. This proof carries more weight than motivation or self-talk because it is grounded in reality. One action may seem insignificant, but to the nervous system, it signals a shift from avoidance to engagement, from hesitation to participation. The first step interrupts old patterns. Inaction reinforces an identity of delay and doubt. Each time you avoid acting, you strengthen the belief that you are someone who waits, hesitates, or needs perfect conditions. Taking the first step breaks that loop. It introduces a new pattern, however fragile at first. That pattern does not need to be confident or flawless. It only needs to exist. Once it exists, it can be repeated, and repetition is what stabilizes identity. Action also changes how you relate to fear. Before the first step, fear feels abstract and overwhelming, magnified by imagination. After the first step, fear becomes specific and manageable. You learn what actually happens when you act, not what you predicted would happen. This shift reduces the power fear has over your decisions. You begin to trust your ability to handle uncertainty, not because uncertainty disappears, but because you have evidence that you can move through it. The first step creates alignment between intention and behavior. This alignment builds self-respect. When you act on what you say matters, you reinforce integrity within yourself. That internal consistency strengthens identity more than external validation ever could. You begin to see yourself as reliable, not because outcomes are perfect, but because your actions match your values. Identity change does not require massive transformation. It begins with a single contradiction of your old story. Each first step says, I am capable of movement. Over time, these small acts accumulate into a new self-concept, one grounded in action rather than intention. The person you become is shaped not by the size of the step, but by the fact that you took it. You don't need clarity, confidence, or perfect conditions to move forward. You need one honest step taken in the right direction. Action changes how you think, how you feel, and who you believe you are. Start small, but start, because movement is what turns potential into reality.